Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. So today we'll be talking something very important, and it's about this video. A Hispanic man, Mexican man, actually did his first experience as with racism, right? And a lot of people stitched to that video. And the Asian woman and other people stitched to the video. We're also talking about how palm-colored people dealt with them and all that, how they were mixed up with black people and all that. And then went further to explain how their parents also did what they experienced from palm-colored people to black people, right? Her parents experienced racism from palm-colored people, and their parents became anti-black, right? They don't want to see black, they don't want to hear anything black, they don't want to associate with black and all that, right? It is the same thing what white people did to them. And these people will rather open, even with everything they went through from palm-colored people, they would rather open their door to palm-colored people than than a black person or black people. I don't know if you understand what I am saying. With everything they went through, like how people treated them badly and all, they already bought into, like, some of them agents, when you look at them, when you see how they act, you can feel that some of them already bought into white supremacists and all that. And also, they feel like they are superior. They know that they cannot be white, and they feel like they are superior to black people because their skin color is a little bit way different than black. Let's just get into this video.
This question goes out to my white people and all of my people of color here in America. How old were you when you came face to face with the realities of racism? For me, I grew up in a strange household filled with an abundance of love, where I was halfway sheltered, but I was also overly exposed to things that I should have never seen in life. By the time I was 5, thanks to my older brothers, I knew things that I should have never learned until I was probably an adult. But without a shadow of a doubt, it was this reality that maintained this balance, keeping me always more mature than kids my age. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, Hollywood in the 80s, and I grew up around Latinos and people of color for most of my time there. I never knew, nor did we discuss systemic racism or the realities of racism. I don't think my family had any idea of what reality we were living in, what kind of police force we had in the city, what kind of crimes were actually happening to black people in Los Angeles in the 80s. My brothers being from New York, my mom decided to take us back to the East Coast, back for them. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Los Angeles riots that happened in the early 90s weren't just the only riots. There were plenty of riots in the late 80s, especially right when we moved. It was the filmed beating of Rodney King that exposed the reality of systemic racism, at least to my generation. But again, I was never surrounded by racism, so when I would watch things on television like the beating of Rodney King, I, thanks to the media at the time, portrayed black people as being the bad ones. I've been doing research on videos on YouTube of the Los Angeles riots and riots all across America that were unjust towards people of color, especially black people, and you could just hear the language, you can find the bias, you can see how it was documented for ages and how it was taught to viewers. The realities of wrongful convictions didn't exist in our world back then. In my family, we glorified the police. All of my uncles were police from Puerto Rico to New York to Florida. We were always brainwashed to believe that our system worked for us. Living in New Jersey and New York, I still never came face to face with racism, at least I thought, because it never impacted me. My neighbors were either Italian or Latino, and everybody spoke Spanish. Anytime any Latino kid ever used the N-word towards black people, it was never in a derogatory sense. It was just the way they used it in terms of endearment, or in a sense of showing dominance in any altercation. Fast forward to 1996, where we moved down south to be with my older brother in Georgia. I luckily finished off the 7th grade down in Georgia in a school that was surrounded by minorities still. There were white kids, but there was an abundance of black kids and Mexican kids. The only thing that stood out was my Jersey accent, and boy was it heavy. But by the time I got to the 8th grade, I was 11 turning 12 that May. And in this school, I was the only Latino child in the entire school, alongside another Mexican boy. Our first week of school, that boy got beaten so badly he was hospitalized and his mother had to pull him from the school. I had no idea why. I grew up in Cali and Jersey. Fights were normal. I didn't know if he pissed somebody off. I didn't know what was happening. Until a couple of weeks later, I started getting warnings from kids in the school saying, hey, you're next. I was absolutely confused. I was a kid who didn't fuck with anybody. I didn't mess with anybody. And one morning I got in a fight in a courtyard with this white boy who started jumping me and attacking me, and he was a lot smaller than I was, but I had to defend myself. I ended up slamming him against a brick wall so hard I sent him to the hospital. This wasn't even a month into 8th grade. And to be expected, I immediately was called to the principal's office. I went inside and I talked to this ginormous man who, luckily for me, was from New York but lived in the South for years. He took a look at me and he said, where are you from? And I said, Jersey, of course with my attitude and my accent. And he goes, well, yeah, I can tell that. And then he told me a series of things that opened my eyes to a reality that I had no idea existed. He took a look at my record and he said, listen, you are the only Latino child in this school. The other one that was here got sent to the hospital because he was Latino. He says, you're going to run into a lot of racism that plagues the hallways of this school and has plagued the hallways of every Southern school for years and years. And you're going to have to fight to survive. But here's the deal. He said, I will let you fight and protect yourself on 2 conditions. A, you not only fight for your survival and you don't send anybody to the hospital, but B, you fight for your education and you have to get A's and B's by the end of the school year. I laughed so hard in his face because my entire school career I was a CD student barely making it past every grade. At this age I had no idea that I was ADHD and dyslexic. But he told me, he says, you can get in as many fights as you want, don't send them to the hospital, prove your point. But if I find out that by report card time you don't have A's and B's, you're out of here. My mother, being the overprotective mother that she was, if she had found out that this was my reality in this new school, she would have lost her shit. And my home life would have been a lot more uncomfortable. So I kept it to myself. Anyway, every day after that day, I got jumped in school by 4 or 5 white kids. I'd get my hair pulled in class, I'd get jumped after gym. What I didn't know was that my principal had conversations with all of my teachers and I didn't know, at least not till way later. Every day I'd come home out of the school bus and finding different ways to mask my knuckles because they were so bloody, or my nose because it was bloody, my clothes because they were bloody. I had 3 hours before my mom would get home from work before she would find out. With all of this going on, I was still unaware of what exactly was at play. I didn't realize that racism was still so alive. I didn't realize that it was so in your face, especially down in the South. This was my first experience ever, and I carried a lot of guilt with me because I was so oblivious growing up as a child. I told the story to one of my mentors one day, and he told me not to have guilt because this was my opportunity to develop a lot of empathy, not only for myself, but to understand that we all live in bubbles. Some people have bubbles bigger than others, but they're all bubbles. And we don't really know the realities that we all go through, each and every one of us. We don't understand our upbringings. We don't understand where we missed the mark. We don't understand where others missed the mark. But it is in this learning that we have a responsibility to open our eyes, to grow, to mature, and be a society that works collectively to understand that not everybody grew up the same way. None of this is a reason to excuse anyone's ignorance. This is simply a reminder that we are all ignorant, that we were all brought up in the same time periods, confused, given different information, painted different pictures. And now we know better, and we're getting to know better. If my educating individuals who are willing to listen absolutely makes a change in their life, then I will forever continue down this path. How old were you when you came face to face with the realities of racism?
I came face to face with the realities of racism on 2 very different fronts at a pretty young age. The first is that my family was living in Southeast Michigan, and I was just shy of 4 years old when Vincent Chin was killed in Detroit by disgruntled auto workers who thought that he was Japanese and were scapegoating Japanese for the decline of the Detroit auto industry. And it's not just that it was being reported on in the local news and my parents were understandably concerned, it's that my family was also experiencing firsthand the racial discrimination and scapegoating of Asians for manufacturing jobs going overseas that had led to Vincent Chin's death. So for a number of years, we would randomly experience having our windows egged, our tires slashed, people would yell slurs at us, we would get things thrown at our car, we experienced denial of service, and pretty much during the entire Reagan years, we had a protocol when on road trips where we would try not to stop anywhere unfamiliar, but if we had to, my mom would wait in the car with my brother and I with the doors locked and the engine running, while my dad would go in to scope out whether a place was safe, and on multiple occasions it was not. And where it really hit home for me was, I think I was about 5 years old, and I was out walking with my parents, and somebody yelled, "damn J-word," at us. And at that age, it made sense to me to yell back, "we're not Japanese." And my dad immediately took me aside and told me to never do that again, because people who would discriminate against and scapegoat Japanese for things that they don't have any control over would do the same thing to Chinese or any other Asians. And I am not kidding. As soon as we got home, I even got the demonstration about how one chopstick alone breaks easily, but how the whole bunch cannot be broken, and that this is why Asians need to stick together. The most harrowing thing that happened when I was 7 years old is we came home one day and there was a message left on our answering machine that was targeting me by name. And I did not understand at that time that clearly bigots were just going through the phone book looking for Asian last names. They had called our number, and our outgoing answering machine message said all of our names. So they didn't know whether I was 7 or 17. It just made it clear that as the daughter of the family, I would be an easy target, and they were threatening SA. And at that age, I think that I didn't even understand a lot of what they were threatening. I just knew that from the tone of their voice and some of what I understood that it was inappropriate and it was scary. And I remember covering my ears and just shutting my eyes and crying and eventually hiding in my room. Now, unfortunately, my parents didn't know how to deal with this, so they dealt with it by really not dealing with it. They erased the message. They changed our outgoing message so it no longer said all of our names, and I think that we even became unlisted in the phone book for a number of years. But they did not tell me that the people who were calling didn't know anything about me. I wasn't being targeted personally. They didn't even know where we lived, and I was going to be safe, probably. And moreover, they never told me that it wasn't my fault. And I think that is when I really started to internalize racism and went through about a decade where I just wished that I wasn't Asian, because in my mind that would have fixed all of these problems. It wasn't until I was nearly college age that I had an opportunity to meet and hang out with a larger Asian community and really feel comfortable and find belonging there that I even began to start reclaiming my Asian identity. In a previous video, I spoke in depth about the second way in which I came face to face with the realities of racism at a young age, and that had to do with confronting my mom's own anti-Blackness. When I started school, her difference in attitude towards my Black classmates versus other classmates became very apparent, and it angered me because at that age I already knew what it was to experience racial discrimination that had no basis in who we are as people and was about things that we can't control. So I felt like, how dare she turn around and do the exact same thing to any other group of people? And I also talked about how I was fortunate enough that the principal of my elementary school was a Black woman who had implemented a program called Students Educating Each Other About Discrimination. And that is where I learned the tools to identify, discuss, and disrupt all forms of discrimination, including racial discrimination. And I talked about the years of uphill battle that it took to get my mom to recognize and admit to her racism and to begin unpacking her biases, which she eventually did. So it's always interesting to me when I hear white parents and educators talk about how young is too young to introduce children to the concept of race, because the reality for many parents and children of the global majority in the United States is they won't get a choice. For many of us, we will be confronted with the realities of racism at a very young age, the first time somebody forces us to experience it.
How old were you when you came face to face with the realities of racism?
Okay, so I know this isn't going to be the response that you want, okay? I was in third grade. I lived on the border of Mexico. I love everyone, and I don't understand when people are picking on me. So when I was in third grade, a bunch of Mexicans thought that it was a good idea to make fun of me, beat on me, and lock me in a bathroom. And they didn't find me for a few hours. And yeah, it was highly traumatizing. I was constantly being made fun of for my whiteness, okay? Constantly. And then I move. By the time I'm in 5th or 6th grade, I move to Laurel, Maryland. I am one of 2 white families in my entire development. I'm one of 13 white girls in my entire school. But I knew what racism was like. And so, because I had dealt with racism personally, I swore I would never, ever, ever look at somebody from the color of their skin and think anything less of them. If anything, I think that they're awesome. I think that brown people have amazing culture and roots and food and music. Like, I love brown people, okay? And I can understand why people would be mean to me. Even at that age, I understood that white people are mean to brown people. And, like, I didn't even get mad at the people that locked me in the bathroom. I didn't even tell my grandparents. I just accepted it. I was just like, okay. Like, later on, like, way later on, like, when I turned, like, 18, 19, these people eventually became friends with me, and we're cool now. But, when you personally experience racism, you can do 2 things. You can either take it personally and become a racist yourself, or you could see the bigger picture and be like, damn, those people were hurt, and those were kids. And you have to understand that they weren't just Mexican. Like, some of them were actually Native. And I didn't understand. I understand way better now. But even then, I was like, I'm not going to take this personally. No, I'm going to take it to heart. I'm going to take it to heart, and I know that the pain is real for these kids. But it turned into me becoming, like, so anti-racist. In fact, I've even, and don't come at me, because the N-word is a negative word. I don't care what you say. It's full of hate. And, like, unless you're like, yo, May, that's the only time that I find that acceptable. Like, I've actually told black people that I do not like that word. I really wish you wouldn't say that word in front of me, because it hurts me. It hurts my heart. I don't like that. And they do. They stop. They don't say it around me, because they understand. I'm not giving them hell. I'm like, I just don't like hearing that word. So yeah. If anything happens like this, like if you ever get a snide comment as a white person from a brown person, just remember. Just remember all that the brown people have had gone through in this country and are still going through. Just remember the systematic racism. Just remember that, like, that, you know, that prisons actually separate from race. Like, they will populate you with the Mexicans, the browns, or the whites. They will not put you with different colors. Like, it's systematic. Like, they're teaching people that you belong to your race, and that's it. And that's not true. That's not true. We are nationless humanites. We are all brothers and sisters. So next time you get a snide remark, like, smile and remember that their pain is deep, and turn that around and go be nice to a brown skinned person. Give them a compliment. Like, treat them like a human, because that's what we need in this world right now. We don't need to be taking things personally and seeking vengeance or hatred. We need compassion, understanding, and caring. And we need to know that we're all one.
How old were you when you came face to face with the realities of racism?
Oh, this is going to get a bit deep. I started experiencing racism I was around 8 to 9 years old. I am not joking. When I was in elementary school, in grade school as we call it, we used to go to summer camp. You know how every elementary school district had, like, summer camps for all the kids and everything during July, and then it ended around August or so, like the beginning of August, like the school type of camps. Yeah, we used to go to the pool, and I remember this one girl, back in grade school, when she would see me in the hallway, and we were having to go to gym class or go to lunch or something, she would always call me Hindu every time, all because I'm, yes, brown, and I guess she assumed that since I'm, yes, Caribbean, Indian, definitely looking more Indian, yeah, she kept calling me Hindu every time rather than just to shout it as an insult. During the summertime, I remember she kept doing that constantly when we went to the pool, and I remember she'd even a few times, oh god, this was bad. I remember I got ragged, what do you call that thing, where you coil up the towel or whatever, and I got rat-tailed a couple of times, and she kept saying Hindu and all that to me, and it was just gross. Things got a bit easier in middle school, but yeah, people were still being jerks, trying to call me names and whatnot. Oh, it got pretty bad in 8th grade because then people started comparing me to the Muslims of 9/11. Oh, this is where it gets rich. Finally, when we went to high school, yeah, I had particular bullies who would try and call me Osama bin Laden Jr. or whatever because I was starting to grow a bit of a scraggly beard. It was all patchy and everything, puberty and all that. And they would say like, oh, why'd you have to go boom boom to Twin Towers and all this? And make all these nasty jokes to me. Or back in history class, I remember this entire group of idiots, they would constantly make jokes about me being a lookalike from The Simpsons. Apu Nahaspi Mapedalan, him. And they would always call me that constantly, all because of, they wanted to make jokes on me about my race, and because at the time I was very scrawny. And, of course, in architecture class, that's when they made that joke about, oh, why'd you have to go boom boom to towers and make all these 9/11 jokes, and everyone started laughing. And, not a sight of someone trying to defend me, that sort of thing. And the best part is, this is where, at the time, I was starting to get into politics, and I was way more conservative then, because that was when I was convinced that, the whole history of both parties being on which side and what have you, and I was always being convinced that the right wing at the time cared about me, that sort of thing. And they just say, oh, we're just making jokes, bro. Like the right wing, they say those things. We're just joking. That is when I basically first realized it. And now, the funny thing is this. A lot of Hinduism is more or less being whitewashed and colonized and full-on gentrified by particular areas. Like, look at New York. You see a lot of people going to yoga, and they're going to Lululemon to get their leggings and all that ready for yoga, and they want to be all spiritual and all that. I'm like, that was literally what you all used to call and make fun of me for. And now you want to act like this? Unreal. Oh, and I still experience it kind of to this day, because before LinkedIn, I had to apply for QA jobs after I was done with my college degree and going towards my master's. So, of course, you have to get the experience at the time. And they kept asking me, oh, you're so-and-so? Oh, well, have a seat there. And it's like, I'm thinking, do you want me to help you pick up your jaw from the ground here? Do I have an extra head here or something? I'm trying to find it. Maybe I can have a conversation with it. So I even had to deal with that. Especially because my name, it's not your typical Caribbean, Trinidadian, or even Indian name for that matter. It's very much Americanized. So, that's when I realized that racism was definitely a thing. But it's gotten a lot better for me over the years. Way better. So, I guess now the new thing is to look dark, but yet they don't want the whole negative consequences of being that particular shade.
This is all I got from this video. And the truth is that some of these people experience all this from palm-colored people. And they still do all this to Black people to this very moment. Look at the Asian woman saying that with everything she went through, right? Her parents were scared that something might happen to her or something might also happen to them. They were really scared, right? And the parents did the same thing colored people did to them, to Black people, because she does not want to hear anything that got to do with a Black person. She doesn't want to see Black people. If you hang out with Black people, like her daughter, I think that she has also mentioned something like that, how her parents were so anti-Black while she was growing up. When she comes home with her friends that are Black, the parents will tell her, I do not ever want to see you with Black people and all that. So now, what is the difference now? Because most of them really want to be white so bad. But because their skin tone is quite different from the real deal, right? They choose to do the same thing the palm color people did to them or are doing to them to White people, because they feel like they are superior to Black people and the rest of it. Now, let me tell us something. The reality is that these people, like with everything they have experienced and all that, if they still have opportunity to tell Black people that they are kind of superior and all, they would do it. And I have seen so many of them several times come out to say it openly and not even hide it. So yeah, it is what it is. Some of them will be like, it is maybe because their parents are not enlightened. They are enlightened. No matter how enlightened, you don't even have to be enlightened to know that this is racism and all that, or that you are doing bad thing. That same person that was trolled by palm-colored people, if she got an opportunity, she would still open her door to a palm-colored person rather than a Black person. You heard what I said, right? She will open her door like the way she told her daughter, you don't have to come back do not mix up with Black people. I don't want to see you with Black people. Do not come home with a Black person. Do not hang out with a Black person. If a palm-colored person comes to her house and a Black person comes, she will rather let in a palm-colored person, the people that showed her their true selves. She will rather open her door to them than opening it to a Black person. Let this sink in. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.